You check your phone. Friday afternoon. The weekend stretches out ahead, and there's nothing there. No messages, no plans, no one who thought of you today. You close the app. You've done this before. The checking, the seeing nothing, the closing. 4 or 5 times a day sometimes, like pressing a bruise to see if it still hurts. It does. And here's what you probably think. Something is wrong with you, that everyone else figured out something you didn't, that the world is full of people who know how to do this, who know how to show up, stay, keep the social connection alive, and you're somehow the exception. But the real answer is far stranger than that. Having very few friends, or none at all, might not be a failure of your personality. It might be a direct result of how your brain is actually built. The loneliness you feel isn't evidence of a defect. It's a signal. And once you start understanding loneliness through the lens of neuroscience and evolutionary psychology, once the psychology of loneliness stops looking like a personal problem, it starts looking like a structural one. Your brain has a number. That number explains almost everything. In 1992, British anthropologist Robin Dunbar was studying primates. He was looking at neocortex size, the outer layer of the brain responsible for complex social thinking, and he noticed something. The bigger the neocortex relative to body size, the larger the stable social group that species lived in. He ran the numbers for humans. The human neocortex, Dunbar found, can maintain stable social relationships with approximately 150 people. Not 500. Not 5,000. 150. He called this Dunbar's number, and it held across cultures, across centuries, hunter-gatherer societies, medieval English villages, modern military units. Your brain can handle a social world of about 150 people before it starts losing track. But that number has layers. Inside the 150 lives a group of 50, people you'd call on for regular support. Inside that, 15 people whose death would genuinely devastate you. And at the very center, the innermost ring, 5 people. Just 5. Your support clique. The people you can call at 2 in the morning when things fall apart. Most people never fill that ring. Research shows the average person has 3 to 5 truly close friends at any given point in their life. A growing number have fewer or none. In 1990, 3% of Americans reported having no close friends. By 2021, that number had risen to 12%, a 4-fold increase in a single generation. In 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General declared loneliness a public health epidemic, placing it alongside smoking and obesity as a direct threat to mental health and survival. So, before you decide that your empty contact list is a personal failure, you're living through the largest collapse of close friendship in recorded American history. The loneliness epidemic isn't a metaphor, it's a measurable public health crisis, and your brain is trying to navigate a social world it was never designed for. The modern world asks you to perform social connection at a biologically absurd scale. Social media gives you access to thousands of people. Your phone buzzes with notifications from people you barely know. You're expected to maintain professional relationships, family obligations, neighborhood goodwill, a personal network, simultaneously, cheerfully, without showing too much of yourself. Somewhere in all of that, your brain is still trying to track the real thing. The 5. The people who actually matter. Real relationships built on trust, history, genuine intimacy are cognitively expensive. Your brain burns resources monitoring emotional tone, reading subtle cues, tracking shared history, predicting behavior. With the right person, that's almost effortless. It runs on its own. With the wrong person, it's exhausting. And that's not social anxiety. That's your nervous system doing an honest cost-benefit calculation. In 1982, researchers John Cacioppo and Richard Petty identified a trait they called high need for cognition, the tendency to actively seek out and enjoy complex, effortful thinking. People with this trait don't just accept information, they examine it, question it, look for the structure underneath. Here's what happens to a brain like that in a shallow conversation. It can't turn off. While someone else hears, "How are you?" and answers, "Good, you?" your brain is doing something completely different. Noticing the micro-expression that doesn't match the words. Tracking whether this person's behavior today contradicts what they said last week. Analyzing the social dynamic in the room, the hierarchy, who's performing for whom. That's not paranoia. That's perception, and perception has a metabolic cost. Small talk for a brain like yours isn't neutral. It's work scanning a frequency that carries no signal. All noise, no data. Your nervous system pays for every second of it. This is one of the real introvert struggles nobody maps clearly. It's not that you don't want connection. It's that shallow connection costs you more than it gives back. You're not broken, you're expensive to know, and you've learned, consciously or not, to ration your energy. In 1951, psychologist Solomon Asch put people in a room and showed them a card with 3 lines on it. Which line matches the reference? Obvious, anyone could see it. But everyone else in the room was a Confederate, in on the study, and they all answered wrong. Confidently, unanimously wrong. What did the real participants do? 75% conformed to the wrong answer at least once. Across trials, roughly 32% of all responses sided with the group, even when the group was demonstrably incorrect. Only 25% never conformed at all. Think about that. Show a person something their own eyes can verify, and 3 out of 4 people will deny what they see to avoid social rejection. The pain of social exclusion activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Being cast out of the group for most of human evolutionary history was death. Your body treats rejection like a survival threat because for 200,000 years it was. The pull toward conformity is ancient. It's the machinery of survival. And the 25% who don't conform, who see the wrong answer and say quietly, "That's not right," they pay for it. People call them difficult, stubborn, hard to read. They get excluded because their presence makes the performance uncomfortable. Making friends as an adult is already hard. For the 25%, it's structurally harder. Genuine social connection requires that other people can relax around you, and some people can't relax around someone who won't pretend. If you've ever felt like you couldn't go along with what everyone else was doing, couldn't pretend things were funny when they weren't, couldn't maintain a friendship that asked you to be a smaller version of yourself, you're probably somewhere in that 25%. The 25% ends up alone a lot. Most popular videos on this topic skip the part that actually matters. A 2015 meta-analysis by researcher Julianne Holt-Lundstad drew on data covering more than 3 million people across dozens of studies. The finding: chronic loneliness increases the risk of early death by 26%. Researchers compared it to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, more damaging, they noted, than obesity. These loneliness health effects aren't fringe findings. They've been replicated, cited by the U.S. Surgeon General, and are now shaping public health policy worldwide. That number gets quoted a lot. What gets quoted far less is this: the research was measuring perceived loneliness, the subjective experience of feeling disconnected, not the objective count of friends. People surrounded by acquaintances, but feeling unseen, reported the same mortality risk as people who were physically isolated. People who lived quietly, minimal social contact, but a genuine sense of deep social connection, reported substantially better outcomes. The threat isn't having few people in your life. The threat is feeling disconnected from the people who are in your life. Your brain doesn't count friends. It measures resonance. Understanding loneliness through that lens changes everything. A lonely brain doesn't go quiet. It goes hypervigilant, stays alert, scanning for danger, releasing cortisol, begins reading ambiguous social signals as threatening. Over time, this reshapes how you move through the world. More guarded with strangers, more sensitive to rejection, more likely to interpret a neutral expression as hostile. Loneliness becomes self-reinforcing. Not because you stop wanting connection, but because the fear of losing it makes connection harder to reach. This is where most advice on the subject collapses. The answer isn't more friends. Not texting someone you haven't spoken to in months. Not forcing yourself into rooms full of strangers and hoping something sticks. Those things can help in specific circumstances, but they don't address the actual problem. Your nervous system isn't protecting you from being alone. It's protecting you from being around people and still feeling lonely. That's the worst kind. Loneliness versus solitude. They sound like the same thing. They're not. The loneliness of solitude is quiet. You know what it is. You can name it, sit with it, take a walk, and let it change shape. The loneliness of the wrong company is something else. Being in a room full of people and feeling invisible. Laughing at the right moments because you've learned the timing. watching everyone else seem at ease in a world that never quite settles around you. In the comments of one of the most watched videos on this topic, someone wrote, "Feeling lonely in the presence of other people is worse than feeling lonely in solitude." 10,000 people agreed. Many of them wrote the same thing in different words underneath it. That's a generation describing the same experience in a YouTube comment section because they had nowhere else to say it. The social world is not short on people, it's short on depth. And your brain, if you have few friends, if you've always struggled to hold on to the ones you find, your brain may be registering that difference more clearly than most, not as a flaw, as accurate measurement. So what do you actually do with this? You probably don't need more friends. You need the right ones. Dunbar's innermost circle holds 5 people. 5. Your brain isn't built for 100 meaningful relationships. It's built for a handful of deep ones. Deep social connection forms slowly. Through repeated exposure, shared experience, the kind of trust that only accumulates under time and pressure. In hunter-gatherer bands, you lived with the same 20 to 50 people for years. You watched them under real conditions, how they handled fear, grief, betrayal. Trust built through sustained observation, not through a good first impression. Not through a fun night everyone remembers differently. That's what your brain is still looking for. Social media has flooded your field of vision with people who look like friends but aren't followers, connections, mutuals, sitting on the outskirts of Dunbar's rings, visible but not close, familiar but not known, people who know your name but not your history, who've seen your face but not your worst day. Behind all of that noise, your support clique of 5 sits mostly empty. Maybe 1? Maybe 0. That's not because you're defective. It's because the conditions that build healthy relationships, time, proximity, shared stakes, repeated exposure to each other's reality, are harder to find in a world that moves this fast, a world that mistakes availability for intimacy, that fills every quiet moment with content so the science of solitude never has a chance to teach you what it knows. Most advice on how to make friends focuses on tactics, what to say, where to go, how often to reach out. The science of friendship points somewhere different. It points toward conditions, toward environments where trust can actually grow, and those environments aren't the ones being sold to you. The introverted lifestyle isn't a retreat from psychological well-being or personal growth. For a brain like yours, protecting your solitude, choosing depth over volume, understanding loneliness rather than just escaping it, might be exactly how you maintain both. The absence of friends doesn't mean your capacity for connection is broken. It means the environment you're living in makes genuine connection structurally difficult. Back to Friday afternoon. You check your phone. Nothing. And instead of the familiar drop, the quiet interpretation of emptiness as proof of something wrong with you, you could let it land differently. Your brain can hold 5 people in its innermost ring. You have maybe 1 or 0. That's not failure. That's a gap. A gap is a space that hasn't been filled yet. A deficit is something missing from your design. Your design is fine. Why am I lonely when I'm surrounded by people? Why can't connection seem to stick? Those questions feel personal, but they're pointing at something much larger than you. A world where 150-person social groups have been replaced by 5,000-follower social feeds, where the relationships your brain is actually scanning for, built on real time, real history, real stakes, are harder to find because the conditions that grew them have been quietly dismantled. The question isn't whether you're capable of connection. It's whether you're looking for it somewhere it can actually grow. Not the bar. Not the networking event, not the group chat where everyone performs a version of themselves that photographs well. The right conditions exist. They're slower and quieter than the ones being sold to you. They require more patience than most people are willing to give. But your brain, the one that notices when the smile doesn't reach the eyes, the one that gets tired from pretending, the one that keeps failing the test of belonging in rooms where belonging means agreeing with wrong answers, your brain already knows the difference. It's always known. That's not a flaw. That's calibration.